Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa is a soap opera, and I'm here to bring you the update. But before I get onto the main news stories, can I once again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support the work that I do here, you know the drill, you can buy me a coffee. Link is in the description box below. Before I get onto the main stories, I do have a Substack, and I do write articles on there. You should check it out. The link is in the description box. You know where it is. So before we get onto the main news story, let's get onto some stories that you might have missed. The first is that we've all been covering the kerfuffle that has been occurring with Panyaza Lusufi, specifically with his distrust or his dislike of the GNU. Obviously, he's been trying to scupper the plans of the DA to co-govern in certain areas of that metros like Swane, and obviously in the province as a whole, because the province was created without a coalition which involved the DA. Many people have noticed that Panyaza Lusufi basically is trying to provoke the GNU parties to have some form of disagreement in order to break up the GNU. Well, Panyaza Lusufi has now been summoned to the ANC's head house, loot freely house, to account for himself as to why he keeps saying anti-GNU slogans, because that's not on, according to the party. Now, last week I also brought you the news of John Hlophe. The leader of the MK party was stopped from participating in the JSC interviews, the Judicial Services Commission, where they go through and they interview potential judges, and a case was brought against Hlophe on the basis that, remember, he was fired from his job for doing some wrongdoings, and I do recall some comments asking, well, what were these wrongdoings? He tried to influence some cases against Jacob Zuma and basically tried to get judges to rule in a specific way in an illegal fashion, basically trying to tamper with the judicial process. And that's why he was obviously ultimately impeached. And many people said, the whole point of the JSC is to hold certain judges accountable. And if you have a judge on there that's basically been impeached because of wrongdoings, it's kind of sending the wrong signal. Well, the original judgment actually was granted, which stopped John Hlophe being involved in the interviews. John Hlophe then tried to actually put an action against the interviews to stop them from taking place while he appealed his initial judgment. And that was unsuccessful. So he's now done the logical thing. Yeah, you didn't fire me, I quit. Yeah, he's resigned. And apparently the rationale for his resignation is that according to the makeup of the interviews, you have to have 3 members from opposition parties, and by him resigning, well, they don't have a quorum. Because they don't have a quorum, they can't continue the interviews. So it's kind of like a 4D chess type move. But it does scream of, you didn't fire me, I quit. Talking of quitting, I also brought you the news last week around Elon Musk meeting the president around the discussion about potentially bringing Starlink to South Africa. And a lot of people in the comment section noted around the BE rules. I mean, I commented on it myself. And there now appears like there may be an amendment to those BEE rules, which the government says they are willing to consider in order to allow Starlink to come to South Africa. And the government basically says that what this could be is a contribution to forms of socio-economic development. So, I mean, we have actually seen this before, right? This is basically Starlink submitting some money to help train people in the country so that they can participate in the economy at a later stage. But if you take this example of a chief that basically got given some cash to upskill his people, and he thought, this money's mine, I'm just going to chow over 50 million rands worth of stuff because it's my cash. Who cares about the training of the people? So this kind of sounds like a bribe to me. I mean, to everyone else, maybe it doesn't, but to me, it just sounds like a bribe. So basically, they're going to ask Elon to bribe him to give him a license. Maybe he should. But anyway, he seems to have beaten the BE rules. So good for Elon. And on to the main news story. Yep, I laughed my head off at the Cosatu strike. There never was. I made a prediction yesterday. The strike was going to be useless and inefficient. It was useless and inefficient. Check how many people actually turned up.
Long live Cosatu, long live! Roar, young lions, roar! Roar, young lions, roar! Amanda, the veterans of Cosatu, Amanda! Viva Comrade Viva! Thank you very much.
Now, interestingly enough, the angle of the camera tries to make it seem like there's a lot of people there. Yeah, there ain't a lot of people there. It's a couple hundred. Remember, this is supposed to be the largest trade union in South Africa. Like, they represent all the workers. Now, just in a recap from yesterday's video, the actual purpose of the strike was to demonstrate unemployment and the high rate of job losses in South Africa, following retrenchments. They were also doing something else that was rather weird. They were demonstrating against the high cost of living and the high cost of electricity. Yeah, but the electricity is governed by the government, and you're part of government through the ANC. Remember Tripartite Alliance? This is against you demonstrating against work that you yourself have put in place. You've caused an electricity hike in terms of the price, and now you're unhappy with something that you did. And that was just the first of the stupidity. Look, I'm not against the whole idea of electricity's gone up like quite a lot, food's gone up quite a lot. Like, we've all seen this happen. But like, for the average person in the street to complain about it, yeah, you kind of don't really have an impact on this, right? I mean, this is being forced upon you by government policy and government inaction. But these guys are literally part of the government. They're literally causing these problems and then complaining about the problems that they're causing. It's bizarre. Now, I must say that I did find it rather amusing as to why they had the strike yesterday anyway, because apparently it was part of the International Day of Decent Work. I didn't know there was such a thing. An International Day of Decent Work. From Cosatu? Anyway, Cosatu came with the usual demands. They want a moratorium on retrenchments because there's too many of those, and South Africa already has a really high unemployment rate. And see, the problem is they're saying that there's very few people with jobs anyway, so what we actually need to do is try to keep them employed, because for every person that's employed, 7 people rely on that person. And I think this is kind of true, especially for the the township or rural economy. That's definitely a stat I've heard before. But they do obviously go on then to state, the reason for these retrenchments. Like, they identify the reasons, and that is that companies can't stay afloat. But then they lose me, right? In the typical fashion where I just think to myself, Cosatu are just dumb. And I laughed myself silly for ages. They said companies only have one objective, and that is to reduce employment. Now, companies don't have an objective to reduce employment. They have an objective to make money. Like, that's the number one rule of business, is to make a profit. You get more money coming in than you have going out. That's all companies are interested in. Now, how you get to that situation is you may have to hire people to do work, to service people, in order to be able to provide whatever it is that you're selling. Like, they don't all sit there one day and go, hey guys, you know what? We're losing loads of money. We're making loads of money, whatever it might be. Our number one goal, we need to fire some people. That'd be funny. Like, no one's thinking like this. The only people that are thinking like this is trade unionists who have never actually had to work in the real world. And I said that yesterday, right? Like, none of these guys have ever had an actual job in a real world. And so they'll just think that people sit there having conversations that never happened with anyone ever. I own businesses. Trust me, I never had a conversation about, oh, let's just fire some people. I usually have a conversation about how can I make myself more lean in order to make money, and by more lean, I mean more efficient in the processes. That actually may mean recruiting more people so that my process is better. Like, that's the way you do business. Everybody knows that, apart from these clowns. I mean, interestingly enough, they then go on to talk about loads of political stuff that, to be frank, had nothing to do with the workers. They talk about the day-to-day improvements of people's lives. They want the Zondo recommendations implemented. They are worried about government austerity and the fact that Pick and Pay is retrenching 12,000 people, apparently. Like, at the end of the day, these are all business issues, including the government austerity, because government has to bring in money. They are not immune from the profit and loss scenario. The profit, or the income in this instance, is taxes. The losses are basically civil wages and the cost of running departments, or their little vanity projects. If the money going out exceeds the money coming in, you're bankrupt. It doesn't matter if you're a company or a government department. It works the same way. Like, we don't just have endless money pits that we can just keep printing forever and a day. But these clowns don't seem to understand it. And it shows. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why the South African economy has been in a very negative state for a while. Let us not forget, these idiots are in government. These utter morons that have zero idea how an actual economy and a business works. Like, just clownery 101. But that's just my views. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Anyway, that's just it from me for now. Until tomorrow. Bye.
Jesus didn't give us a book. I need to make that clear. Nowhere in the entirety of the New Testament, in the entirety of the Gospels, in the entirety of St. Paul's epistles, you name me one, that it says Jesus gave us a book. He gave us a church. So if anybody has any right to translate the divinely inspired word of God, it is the authority in whom Jesus Christ is appointed. And that authority is the Catholic Church. That is the only church that has the right to translate the scriptures. End of story.